Happening now. We'd like to welcome our viewers from across North America and around the world. This is the EdTech Situation Room, episode 359 for September the 24th, 2025. My name is Wes Fryer. I am coming to you from Charlotte, North Carolina, where I am a middle school STEM and media literacy teacher. And joining me as always from almost the Great White North. I don't know. You call Montana the Great White North? It's great. It's big sky country, and it looks like it with this background.
Yeah, I mean it's great. It's certainly white in the wintertime, and it's in the north. So here we are.
It's Dr. Jason Neiffer, the EdTech Yoda of the North.
Well, good evening, Dr. Fryer. How are you tonight?
Well, it's a bit surreal today, but I'm happy to be here. I'm glad that we can connect. And I heard a rumor that you may actually be flying to the east sometime soon. And I just can't wait. And so inquiring minds want to know, what kind of a custom barbecue menu would you want to have if you had an opportunity to request your dream menu, sir?
Well, and I'll just tell you right now, Dr. Fryer, I know that you've given, so for everyone's edification here, all three listeners of your edification, for the first time since well before the pandemic, right?
Oh, yeah. It's been a long time.
Yeah. Dr. Fryer and I are going to be in not just the same time zone, because we're often in the same time zone. We're going to be in the same city. So I'm really excited to be joining my colleagues from the Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance. Their annual conference starts on. I've got meetings this weekend, but the conference proper starts on Monday, and it happens to be in Charlotte, North Carolina. So I think I've been to Charlotte before. I'm getting to the point where I'm starting to lose where I've been and where I haven't been. I think I've been to Charlotte before. And our good friends, the North Carolina Virtual Public School, which is a Virtual Learning Leadership Alliance partner of ours, and I've been buddies with members of their staff since the early days of MTDA. But we are hosting our annual conference there. So representatives from all 21 of the state virtual schools that are part of our alliance will be getting together and sharing best practices about distance learning and doing amazing stuff. But it's in Charlotte this year, and so I am coming a little early to hang out with Dr. Fryer, and he's giving me the option of a home cooked meal or a night on the town. I am ambivalent because I'm sure the food will be lovely either way, but really it's the company that I'm in this for. So very excited to see Dr. Fryer, and I don't even know if I've met Shelley, right?
Ooh, maybe you haven't. That's right.
Yeah.
Because my dad, when we were up in Big Sky Country in person, it was my dad who was up
met
there.
Your dad. Yep.
Maybe, I don't know.
Nelson concert.
At ISTE? I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah. So yeah. But in any case, I'm thrilled. And it's good to be able to see you and shake your hand again. And so that's coming up this weekend. And in fact, it's going to be a great thing because there's no time better spent not just with good friends, but also with my wonderful colleagues from other state virtual schools. So really excited to be a part of that this coming weekend. So, but as much as I think we'd like to spend the hour planning our time together, I think we have another purpose tonight.
Well, we do. We missed a whole bunch during the summertime, but we are back, and now I'm texting my dad and tell him, "Hey, Dad, we're live. We may have a live viewer." We're here to talk about, I think, the tech news. So what is the format of this week, almost, allegedly weekly venture that's sometimes missed?
Yes. Well, I think we're going to take a look at some headlines across the techosphere, as it were, and we like to check out what people are talking about. I will admit that one of the things that's been really challenging, other than our life schedules have certainly intervened and made things a little more difficult, but the sheer volume of news, and I wish it were just about AI, because I feel like that would itself be hard to handle. But the extraordinary situation going right now with both domestic and global politics, and I also feel like that somehow the tenor of non-AI tech news is certainly evolving and changing as well. So certainly we'll talk about some AI tonight, and we may dabble around some other stuff before we get into the AI, but inevitably down that rabbit hole. We've also got some social media, freedom of expression, and free speech news. There's a lot going on there. We will do our best to comment on the bigger picture and trying to stay out of the political ugh that continues to dominate the discourse in our country. We have some news regarding China, media literacy news, security news. I just unboxed my brand new iPhone 17 Pro Max. I do not have a review on it yet. I am on which won't last. I mean, I'm not. I don't have imminent retirement on my mind, but it's certainly within the purview of my not too distant future. So I am taking advantage of the fact that I'm on a T-Mobile plan right now that allows me a yearly upgrade on my iPhone. So I did buy a new iPhone 17. It's currently charging and downloading from my cloud, but I'll talk very briefly about new iPhones, and then we'll end our night tonight in our Geeks of the Week. Dr. Fryer, thank you for doing the bulk of our link work tonight. Is there a place that you would like to start? Is there a burning topic that you would like us to bat about?
Oh, well, a bunch of these articles are probably ones that you shared on Substack that I picked up. So if you don't, or no, you shared on LinkedIn. So yeah, Jason is Mr. AI, and LinkedIn is his favorite place. Well, why don't we start there? I just dropped this one in underneath your jaw droppers category, but this was the MIT Technology Review back on September 8th, that 80% of ransomware attacks now use artificial intelligence. And one of the things that occurs to me is how many teacher lessons are crafted using at least some AI? Or how many teachers are using AI per day? I would predict that across many different fields of professional work, AI is playing a significant role. So, I guess this might surprise people, but if you've been using AI, especially to do any kind of coding at all, this shouldn't be a surprise. Did this raise your eyelids when you saw it, Jason?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not surprised by this at all, but I also feel like that that we the sheer volume of different types of attacks and spam and phishing attacks, I'm seeing it like noticeably more. And I'll give you an example of this. We onboarded a new employee 2 weeks ago, and I'm not going to mention her name here, not because you can go find this information on LinkedIn. In fact, that's my next point. But but she was exposed to something that I have never seen the volume of before. She was exposed to a phishing attack, someone pretending to be me within 24 hours after posting her new job on LinkedIn. Now, that's not new. That LinkedIn is a huge intelligence source for those that are trying to engage in ransomware and other cyber attacks. But we've had experience over the last 5 years that we strongly believe that LinkedIn is the cause of, or at least the source of the information, not the cause, but the source of the information, because, well, for example, this individual is not on any other social media. They're not even on our employee page yet. Like, they're not in our employee directory.
So that really confirmed the origin of the source.
Yeah, and also that there's other clues that LinkedIn is the source of that. There's certainly the connection, and then also, I mean, I'm assuming, actually, I have a reason behind this one too. I'm assuming that it has something to do with cell phone records and cell phone databases, because this happened a couple years back too, that members of my colleagues' families were getting text messages purporting to be me, and and they still look kind of dumb, right? Like, but my favorite, the joke now going around the office, in fact, this new employee received one this morning that, hey, I need your help on something, let me know if you're available, and it's signed Dr. Jason Neiffer, because I sign all my text messages Dr. Jason Neiffer, right?
Right, of course.
Yeah, of course. I mean, why wouldn't I? So there's always, sketchy things. And this one this morning, I think, was a 303 area code. So, there's,
It was a text message?
yeah, these were text. Yeah, she's received 9 text
Wow.
messages in the last 2 weeks
Wow.
that are related to that, and also emails, right? And so
What do you
that
call that? That's spear, I guess, a spear phishing
I think it's
SMS?
spear phishing, yeah,
Well, yeah.
and, and in that case, well, and I do think that, and I've heard this from superintendents and those that do get new jobs that are reflected in employee directories or on something like LinkedIn, that is really common, that you then become the person that's being imitated, because that power differential is more likely to pick up the fish in the spearfishing analogy, right?
Yeah. Well,
But
when you're at a transition point in your life, you
yeah,
can be susceptible. I know when we
yeah,
were moving, buying a house, I was about to wire a bit of money, for a down payment. I really felt like I had a target on my back. Thankfully, something didn't happen. But I think part of well, if you get a new job, and you're using LinkedIn, I don't know that you can really, I don't know that you really want to stop that. But I do think we probably should be wary of sharing life transitions,
yeah,
and just, I mean, the awareness that it's happening is important, right? For people to, because, I don't know, there's different ways of thinking about this, but when I was in high school, my mother was all into school team training, and she read Stephen Glenn and Jane Nelson, Raising Self-Reliant Children in a Self-Indulgent World. And it was about trying to help prevent self-destructive behaviors among, adolescent youth. And yes, I did do a persuasive speech when I was in college about this on the individual events tour. And that's how I can rattle that off. But like, rehearsing your response to things is important. And this was in the context of peer pressure, right? Whether it was smoking or illegal drugs or, solicitations for other kinds of behaviors. Practicing being aware of things, it's really important. And that's not just for kids. So that's that's one of my responses to this is like, you telling that story and sharing that story with others is important, because people need to know, hey, you're being onboarded here, watch out for spear phishing. Wow.
yeah, yeah, and yeah, and that is an important note about life transitions. And I should mention something, because I did talk about this a little bit in the podcast. My father passed away a couple weeks ago, and of Alzheimer's, and Parkinson's disease. And it's something that we had that conversation with my mom, because my wife had seen some articles that scammers are searching through public records to look for the recently deceased, and then targeting survivors with all sorts of things that, and the disgusting part about that, of course, is that they're targeting people at just such a terrible and vulnerable time in their life. And that's part of the reason why they're doing that, is because they perceive that's going to increase the effectiveness of the attack. But it's truly disgusting. But it's also something that, especially if you're kind of a tech person in your family, and people rely on your advice, like, that's something you almost certainly want to talk about, and make sure that they understand that they are targets, and that there's very few things in the world um, that are important enough to where you can't pause and contact a trusted relative, or you can't pause or even call 911 if it's a situation where they're being told that the police have a warrant for your arrest. And we've even had employees who are very tech savvy. They get sucked into the drama of something like, I was just told that I had or that I was there was a warrant for my arrest or a fine, because I was supposed to report for jury duty. Like, if anything sounds sketchy, there is just no situation where it would be a bad idea to pause or even hang up a telephone call, and then call a trusted relative, call a friend. If it seems to involve law enforcement in any way, call police. I think this is something that we want to be very thoughtful about, and let our relatives know that there is a lot of risk now, and being very careful and thoughtful about this is of utmost importance.
Did I tell have you this would be a while back, but did I tell the story about the phishing phone call, that I had when we had moved here, and, it was over an Amazon package, and, I did actually read a code, or maybe I was about to read a code, and my brain have I shared that before?
You might
Probably.
have, but I think it's a good story to tell again because I think it's also important to know that don't feel gullible, right? Like the bottom line is that us that are it's telling you these warnings, like we have to check ourselves too. But I tell that story again, Wes.
Well, this was when we were finalizing our sale of a house in Oklahoma and the purchase of a house here. And it was a phone call about an Amazon package that had been, and it was supposedly my bank, that had been ordered but shipped to Dallas for like $200. And so, anyway, this is an example of social engineering and folks trying to, come up with a creative way to fish you and to hook you. But um, I think it's embarrassing to say that you did anything like that. I'll just say I ended up changing my password after this. And you every time you get a message, I think that was what finally clued me, because they were like, okay, go ahead and send us the text message we just sent you. It's from the bank. It says, don't ever share this with anybody, which, should be a good
Yeah,
clue. And I didn't. And I was like, I'm hanging up. And then I'd call the bank. And of course, I just felt like an idiot. But this happened like between classes or something. And I, was feeling rushed. But, I guess some of the social engineering is probably, how can we get someone's blood pressure to go up, right? Because if it's and I've heard stories about this with neighbors, like somebody says they were in a car accident, something traumatic was happening. We've talked about this, spoofing voices, right? Even with a small amount of recording of someone's voice that can just be off a social media video, for example. It's now possible with 11 labs and other tools to completely spoof that person's voice and to make it sound pretty reasonable. So anyway, just I think that part of the training and the preparation needs to be, if something is getting your blood pressure up, and especially if somebody is then asking you for information, for a login code, money,
yeah,
pause, wait, and then at least maybe check with one person first before you give them the password, send them some money, do something like that. Because that's the first time I've heard of that kind of, new job, LinkedIn based, spear phishing. I was trying to convince our head of school, it's been 4 or 5 years ago since I was the director of technology, to take our faculty email addresses off the public web, because every single one of our parents and people in our community had the internal, student information system. And you have someone answering the phone every single day who can be a person vetting, calls or vetting messages and things like that. But he just really didn't want to, because other independent schools were still having their lists and letting people directly contact and all that. But I think that the security risk and threat is so big, because the other thing about that is, as soon as someone can see the email addresses in your organization, they can tell what formula you use for setting up the accounts. Is it first name dot last name? Is it last name first initial at? Organizations have a formula, and anyway, that can really then lead to mass phishing, accounts or attacks and things like that. So I would know, that would be an interesting security article to write, Dr. Neifer, polling both public, K-12 and private K-12, and how many are still listing the email addresses of teachers and other staff on a public webpage. I don't
yeah.
think.
Well, and in fact, now that I think about it, I think my organization does too, right? And like, yeah, and it's definitely sketch. And there are there are things like WordPress extensions where you can put a directory that adds a couple steps in between, so it's not as, or it can set up a form to contact you as well. I think that's all things that you should look into and have your tech people certainly vet different ideas there. But you know, I'm almost certain that you and I have both said this 100 times, even you know, last year on the podcast. But it's a pretty dangerous world out there, and you know, you got to find a balance between, you know, doing your business right, and using these extraordinary tools for the ways that they can help improve things. But you have to be really thoughtful about the fact that there are a lot of people out there that would love to part or have you part with your data, your money, your resources, and it's a pretty serious situation for sure.
Let's do one more quick one. We're going to have to balance the bad news with the good news. So this is going to be more bad news. So we're going to have to like balance a little more. Hello to our 2 live viewers, by the way. I don't know if we might have to have Peggy or Dad, but this is a podcast that was shared with me by Brian Turnbaugh, who is a media literacy educator up in Chicagoland. Got to know him in 2019, and he has been just a great source to me of so many different links. Unfortunately, it looks like the chat broke that. I don't like it when it does that. The Galaxy papers inside China's AI persona army. I didn't know about this, but now they're and this was through a leaked document. There was a company called Galaxy, and they have developed what they call an army of AI personas. And so these are AI bots, but they are trained specifically on individuals, and they are specifically deployed to influence these people, and not to do it in a generic way, but to do it in a highly specific way that is most likely to influence them, and to also not reveal that they are a bot. And so this is a great podcast. It's 21 minutes long. It's from September 19th. It's from PRX, the Recorded Future News. And I highly recommend it. Have you heard of AI personas before, Jason, in your AI readings? And
not in this particular context. Like I've heard that term kind of batted around a little bit, but this context is new to me.
yeah, well, and it gets very tinfoil hat, and I had emailed someone today about this, and at the Moodle Moot in 2020, when I had a chance to participate and share a keynote with the nicest introduction I've ever had by someone on this call, I met some folks who are doing online training for cybersecurity and for countering online extremism and just extremist groups. And boy, that whole national security, law enforcement, homeland security, aspect. And we've got some other articles about this. Like psychological warfare and psyops are real. We have nation states as well as non-state actors who really want to do our nation harm. And in a time of extreme polarization, it should come as no surprise to anyone who, is aware of national security issues that there are folks who are going to try and exploit that situation to their advantage. So we have the personal side that we're talking about, like be aware of being able to, be phished and people trying to hack you, etc. And then we've got things happening at a larger scale. So you want to give us some good news? You have an Apple device in your hand. There was a lot of Apple announcements. Any opinions about any of that?
Yeah, well, actually, let me do one more like good news AI one here for a second. So, this is from ScienceAlert on September 19th, and they're reporting that there is an AI model that is real, right? And they reported in the journal Nature about something called Delphi 2M AI, which has the ability to predict the rates of more than 1,000 diseases years into the future, is the words that I'm trying to say out loud, and could be a way to help diagnose diseases well before they or I should say, wow, I'm really nailing this. Allows doctors to basically see diseases before they have visible symptoms. And they trained it on the model from a large-scale biomedical research database called the UK Biobank. So in other words, what these models are doing is that they have a certain amount of capability to them, and then they start feeding it vast amounts of data so it can make inferences from that data. It's and when we say this is AI, like it's like ChatGPT and Claude and Copilot and I should say Copilot, it's not a model, and Llama and all the related models, but instead
Don't
of
forget
training
Grok.
yeah, or Grok, yeah, that's a good example of that too. Instead of training it on just output, instead then it uses its neural networks to help take these large data sets and spot things in then fresh data, right? And so the way we would see that in ChatGPT is that when we ask ChatGPT questions, it uses its neural networks in order to come up with an answer, and it's basically just a long equation is how all these pieces work. But instead of taking the input of your question and outputting with answers, instead it's able then to analyze data like personal health data in order to determine if it fits patterns that are well beyond what our predictive models have now, which are not based necessarily on AI or logarithmic thinking. And the authors of the studies say it's a long way from getting us improved healthcare or improved outcomes, but the researchers are very impressed that this could be amongst the many extraordinary advances that AI can help bring to healthcare.
On sort of a related note, it's always fun when I've got these mouse going around. Where's my mouse? Do you use AI tools at all for alerts for things like that? Because I know I was hearing, I think it was the guy who created what's the incredible math engine that's just Wolfram Alpha, right? It was the Wolfram Alpha creator who was talking about different AI tools he was using to stay on top of journal articles and writings and things, summarizing and stuff. Do you use anything like that as sort of a bot to help tell you the things you need to be looking at for the day?
I don't. Well, yes and no. Actually, I have. So I think we talked about a little earlier this year. One of my experimentations, part of what I've been trying to do the last 6 weeks or so is that, I mean, let's be clear. I love playing with this stuff, right? Like it is just, I could lose, easily 5 hours on just image generation. In fact, the other night I was should have been preparing for a presentation, and instead I'd found some prompts for Gemini, and I think we did talk about Nano Banana on this on the last
we did a couple times, yeah.
But it's stupid good. I mean, what it can do, and like these are the kind of prompts that I've been playing with. It's things like uploading a picture of myself and then having it take my clothing and erase me out of it, basically, right? And then it just gives me the clothing almost like it's in an ad or something, or like a leaflet, and just silly, right? And again, it's just free in Gemini, right? So and it's stupid fast too, but that's obviously an amusement. But I do think that we are getting to a point where, especially if you're an advanced user and you don't mind things being a little wonky, then we should be figuring out ways to make sure that we are directing these tools to the productivity in our lives, right? And so I have an Obsidian vault. We've talked about Obsidian in the past, and I have a direct hookup between Claude, the desktop app, and Obsidian, and I use it as a virtual assistant. And so the first thing I do every morning is go back and forth with Claude and ask it what my schedule is, and I make sure that it creates an Obsidian note for me for all my meetings, and so I can take notes in all those meetings. And at the end of the day, I go through and I have it process those notes and put them in the right directories. so that so that I can have a record of what we've decided and what we talked about in meetings. And if it's a meeting I'm recording, I put the whole transcript in there, and I have an individual custom GPT that turns it from the raw transcript into a detailed Obsidian note that includes things like action items and quotations from the meeting. And like that, that's where it's really helping my productivity. Now, it's put together with the AI equivalent of duct tape and rubber bands and a little bit
It's
of
an AI app smash, though. We've talked
yeah,
about
it
app
is.
smashes for years in the
Yeah.
EdTech world.
And I do think that once I think we've talked about MCP servers in the past, Model Context Protocol. It's an open source protocol that was developed by Anthropic, the makers of Claude, and all sorts of things have MCP server access. And in fact, we're waiting for, there's a developer of a Google Workspace MCP server that I've been talking to the developer to see if we can experiment a little bit with it at work. But it's not just that it reads your data, but it can also modify your Google Docs and modify, in this case, Obsidian notes. And so it can help take a look at or do things interestingly for you over time. And I think that kind of ability for it to be agentic is a term we've heard a lot in 2025. But once that becomes more real and not just kind of a fancy parlor trick, then that's where AI becomes, I think, an extraordinary day-to-day tool that will start to slip just behind the scenes and do things for you, right? To quote my mentor at the University of Montana, Martin Haraji, the tech works best when you don't know you're using tech, right? Like when it disappears into the background. We got close to that in some earlier eras here, right? But the bottom line is that we are in a situation where I do think that we're going to start to notice some pretty extraordinary stuff in the background pretty quickly.
Wow. All right. Well, I should have known we'd have a robust answer to that question. You are living in the future, my friend. The future
Yeah,
is here.
it's wild stuff.
It's just not evenly distributed. All right. What would you like to do next?
Well, let's talk about the Apple stuff. My phone is downstairs. My new phone is downstairs, downloading from iCloud right now. So that's where that's going. But Apple had an event 2 weeks ago where they announced a whole bunch of new devices. Probably the most prominent ones were new iPhones, which include an iPhone Pro, an iPhone Pro Max, and then this new thing, the iPhone Air, which is kind of thin, super thin, and kind of minimalistic hardware device. And I will say that there's nothing, there's nothing here that changes everything, because I don't think that's the era we're in with cell phones right now. They are incremental improvements, but a couple of the big notes, they did move away from the titanium models of iPhones, and now they're using an aluminum body that was for heat disbursement. And most of the new models, with the exception of the iPhone Air, now have what's called a vapor chamber, which is basically a little area on the inside of the phone that helps disperse heat through the aluminum body. There were a lot of reports with the iPhone 16, which had the titanium body, that supposedly, if you were using it, not supposedly, these are confirmed reports, that when you were doing something like highly intensive games, or rendering video, or doing things that were really taxing the phone, that they had the proclivity to overheat. And their new I think it's an A19 chip is the new chip in here. And then of course it came with iOS 26, which is the newest version of iOS. And again, nothing game changing in here. There is a new update to the interface, which is now called a Glass, which again is I don't know if I love it. I did upgrade to iOS 26 on my other iPhone, or I should say my previous iPhone, because I'll be sending this one back to trade in. But nice devices. I will say that I saw some coverage on them over the weekend. Some kind of prominent voices in the iOS space were, or I'm sorry, the Apple space were talking about that the gap between the iPhone and the iPhone Pro and the iPhone Pro Max has diminished to a point that perhaps the expense of the Pro Max isn't worth it for many users. I've also heard some early reviews on the iPhone Air. The thing about that's interesting about the iPhone Air is that they didn't really talk about like any statistics with the batteries, like the size of them. There have been teardowns by the kind of usual suspects in the teardown space, and it is a smaller battery. But I've also heard that they did make a lot of compromises to make the iPhone Air so thin, but they were compromises in service of battery life. So it's still going to be a pretty solid phone, and especially if you're a caseless iPhone user, which I think is the ultimate flex. I could not be a caseless iPhone user. I am way too klutzy for that. But
They are pretty durable, though. My wife has kind of gone that way for a bit, and
ooh, that's a flex. Like
well, and yeah, there have been some incidents, and it's held up without scratches and whatever. I mean, it's impressive. I'm not trying to throw a glove down for anybody to challenge them, but yeah.
And then the other thing that was announced too was new Apple Watches, and so the Watch 3 or Watch Ultra 3, sometimes their names get stuck in my mouth. The Apple Watch Series 11 is now available as well, and they have more health features, including, if I understand it correctly, it can tell your blood pressure through, like, they're using an AI model to take data that's not necessarily your blood pressure and then read your blood pressure. I don't really understand it very well, but I have read a lot of early data to suggest, or I'm sorry, early reviews to suggest that's a pretty nifty feature.
And I'll say again, and this is actually, I think, hopefully we're not going to get, a copyright strike because we're showing the Apple website. I went to the news article that you had shared from Apple Newsroom and just, scrolling now through their website. Apple is masterful, not only in their presentations and their videos, but also their web pages. I continue to teach a middle school web design class, and we've used different websites. It's just stunning how immersive, how interactive, and how educational this is, right? Because these are all, many of these things are complicated things which are being broken down, explained with icons, with graphics, with visuals. Of course, this is marketing, right? But wow, it really is amazing. Which model Apple Watch, by the way, Dr. Neiffer, are you currently sporting?
I think I have a 6 or a 7. And part of it is that, I mean, this is true of really all the Apple stuff, right? Like, if you're not using the newer features or you don't have an issue like battery life, I mean, this stuff lasts forever. And so, and by the way, I've never bought a new Apple Watch. Like, I've always bought used Apple Watches. And I think the 7 I bought a couple of years ago for next to nothing, a couple months after the prices started tanking on that series of watches because of the used market, and it's super great. And I will say, I mean, I love the Apple Watch for sure, but I will say I don't know if I use the Apple Watch, right? Like, I wear it every day, and I certainly wore it more than whenever I used an Android Wear watch or one of the Google watches. Like, I feel like it's more important for me to wear the Apple Watch. I'm not entirely sure why, but they are really marvels of engineering.
I mean, it's amazing. I've got the page for Swappa up here, and every time, new watch comes up, prices are
Yep.
going to go down. So I'm also sporting the 6th generation, which was a nice upgrade. I think I was on an Apple Watch 2 for quite a while, which was honestly fine. But
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, the main thing I have is the rotating photos, giving me different pictures, and
Yeah.
I'm not, and just timers and basic stuff. I probably should go in. Do you ever do anything with this Apple Store and go in for like one of those classes?
I've never done it, but I've heard good things about them.
Yeah, we did one a number of years ago, and we probably should go back, because you always pick up different things. So anyway, wow. Okay. Well, I think I'm trying to think if there's anybody. This is an interesting little side note. So, it's in terms of phones, uh, children, our 3 children, until pretty much last month, had all been on our plan, even with a 27-year-old. But the 27-year-old finally left the nest and left T-Mobile and is on AT&T with his partner, and that's good. But anyway, I don't. So yeah, I'm not. I think he's gotten a lot of use out of his phone. I don't know how long he's had his for quite a while.
Well, and I'm in a position right now where I can take advantage of the advanced T-Mobile plans, and we are going to take a closer look at it because we've had some family come on and off our plan, so we'll take a closer look at that. But I mean, the bottom line is that if if you're an Apple person, and I think this is also true if you are buying higher end Android phones, right? But if you're an Apple person, my mom is using, I think it's a 6-year-old iPhone that's still getting updates, and it's working great for her, right? Like, and also we're getting to the point, we still pay more for data than we should in mobile in the United States. No other country pays the prices we do. Actually, maybe Canada does, but outside of North America, nobody pays the price we do for data. So if you are paying a lot of money a month for a phone, make sure that you're getting device subsidies out of it, right? That used to be the rule, and now that's reserved for some upper plans. But if you're not doing that, then chances are one of the subcarriers, the one that I used for a long time as a secondary SIM was Visible, which is owned by Verizon. I've also had extraordinary luck with US Mobile, which allows you to they have a really sweet thing that I actually use as a backup SIM right now, but that you can have 2 plans wrapped into one from 2 different networks, and it costs $40 a month for unlimited data. It's stupid cheap, but no phones come with that, right? So you're financing the device out of your pocket. But if you want to keep your device for 5 years, think about it or you could even get a year old phone, maybe even refurbished from Apple directly, and price it out over 4 years. You're going to do really well. Like, it requires more management than just going to the store and buying a phone and a plan. But yeah, there's lots of good options now. If you want to be kind of clever about the way you go about that process.
Awesome. Let's talk a little bit about media statistics. So this was one from Sherwood News. I think we've used them before. By some measures, TikTok has grown bigger than Facebook or Instagram in the United States. This is from September 7th, 2025. We haven't actually, I don't think, talked about this for a little bit, but, our chief executive has continued to move back this date where TikTok was going to be, if it wasn't transferred over to U.S. control, it was gonna go offline, and there was that little brief blip where it was off and then it was back on. And so now it looks like Oracle is going to be taking over TikTok operations. And I don't have an article here in the chat or our notes specific to this, but what I heard is China is going to maintain the algorithm, but there's just going to be some U.S. ownership. But anyway, this is talking about monthly app users, and so you can see that monthly active users, TikTok in August of 2025 is estimated to have 183 million, to Instagram's 169 million, and Facebook's 157 million, and then after that's Pinterest, Snapchat, Reddit. So this is stunning to me. I mean, I absolutely remember TikTok, what's that? And, I didn't think YouTube was going to be that big of a deal. I mean, well, come on, what are people going to use a video platform for? So it's, TikTok is significant. I think that we need to be paying a lot more attention to digital communication in school, in English class. I really think that we should be studying and talking about influencers. I think there's a lot of schools that are still, focused on a canon of maybe what was taught in the 50s or the 60s. And reading is important. And I've read different articles about, how maybe the screen itself is, putting such a, there's a lot of changes that have happened, and geopolitically, there's a lot of reasons for those things, and the fact that folks are reading less, has an impact. But anyway, I think that we need to pay attention to TikTok. I'm glad, Jason, you've encouraged me, through your discussion about TikTok. I know you've kind of wrestled with how much time you spend with it, but you've talked about what a phenomenal algorithm it is, and hey, I posted another, barbecue chicken video on my TikTok, which anyway, it's a small amount of use, but it's still using the tool and having some direct experience with it is hugely better, I think, than simply reading about it. And so
Yeah.
that was something that caught my eye. Any thoughts about that in TikTok?
Well, I mean, so, and to be clear, like TikTok's not my phone right now, right? And it's not like
Oh,
yeah, I've deleted off my phone because, and I do think it's an extraordinary adrenaline rush, right? Like it is tweaked to do exactly what you fear that it does, right? Which is to keep you engaged. But to your broader point, Wes, that I think that it is super interesting that, uh, well, first of all, that it ushered in an era of short form video, right? And I don't know if this is just me or if you've noticed this on your YouTube app on your phone, but YouTube is trying to go to shorts now directly, so that you get, hooked in, and then, 20 minutes later you get spit out of a Seinfeld rabbit hole on YouTube Shorts, and I don't like that, right? Because like if I want shorts, I'll click on shorts, right? But YouTube is as much of as I just love the YouTube platform, it's also trying to steal your eyeballs. But you mentioned like thinking about researching on creators, something that I think has been really broken for a long time. I mean, there are rules for creators from the Federal Trade Commission, right?
you're supposed to disclose when you are being paid, for instance,
Right.
by a sponsor, so that people know, oh, you're not just sharing that you like to drink Coke, you're being
Right.
paid by Coke to do that.
And what's interesting about that is that ignoring, the last 9 months, and I have no idea what enforcement looks like that in the current administration. It wasn't being forced that aggressively during the Biden administration either, right? And I think part of it is because the sheer number of creators that exist, right? Like we all know about, Mr. Beast, and there's dozens and dozens and dozens of major creators that I do think have tons of eyeballs of preteens, teens, and 20 somethings, right? So yeah, that I get that, right? But there are a lot of people that are full-time content creators that I think probably are skirting a lot of rules and not disclosing really important relationships. And yet that's where the large variety of I think younger folks are getting their information now, right?
News,
It doesn't mean
facts,
there aren't.
perceptions of the world, like they are perceiving the world through the lens of the TikTok app.
Right, right. And now that said, I think a lot of old media organizations have adapted well to that. When I do go back on TikTok, I get a lot of pretty good suggestions for news organizations, and probably the kind of news I'd be interested in if I were really being more aggressive about that. But the bottom line is that we are very, very, very much in an era where yeah, don't show off our statistics, guys, but both viewers checked in.
Well,
But
I was going to point out, though, is that shorts
yeah,
are significant, and why do we not see any here? Because we've got shorts on our channel. That's weird. Huh. Yeah.
No wonder the youths aren't watching us.
Oh my God. Well, and Descript as well as Substack will use AI tools to identify perhaps the most viral, potentially viral, clips in an episode. And anyway, these are just things that I do not think mainstream education is talking about. And it's just, and media literacy is so important because, to your point about short form, like short form video reels is like the drug that the world is becoming addicted to, or
Yep.
is addicted to. Maybe that's what that article means, because that's what TikTok is. TikTok is not long form video.
Yeah.
Wow.
And the bottom line, and you know, and even like if you use one of these tools, if you use these dangerous drugs, if you use one of these tools, right? Think about like it's short attention span theater, literally, right? Like, and it really, you know, the fact that you can instantly flick your finger and get to something that is logarithmically chosen to you for you that may catch your attention, but if it doesn't, then that helps feed the model, right? Like that, you know, it's just an extraordinary power. And you know, there were tools that were close to this pre-TikTok for sure, right? So it's not like they completely invented the model from scratch, but you know, it is having a profound effect, and very much on our kids too. And you know, I don't have many notifications turned on my phone. I've turned off news notifications. I do get text message notifications, and I do have my ringer on for my phone. But I also am not a. I mean, I text for sure, but I think there are a lot of people text typically a lot more than I do. But you know, the bottom line is that there is very much a wow, we had an episode with 500
No, it is
initial
a
viewers.
short. It is a short titled Sam Altman's Vision of
Oh,
AI Superintelligence. It's 2 minutes long from December 28th, and it has 584 views. And this is interesting, right? Because I guess you have to be less than 60 seconds to publish as a short. I don't know. We just have videos on our channel, not shorts. But again, if you're not playing with media, you're not using these tools, your depth of understanding, I mean, everybody's depth of understanding and knowledge is going to be limited, but um, gosh, this is important. I mean, folks, think about it. The way that human beings are perceiving reality today is mediated by a huge margin with the screen, and with TikTok specifically. That is a very significant dynamic
yep,
that continues to unfold before our very eyes.
yep.
Okay, we have 8 minutes left. Let's go into kind of a speed round.
Okay.
So I want you. I would love for you to talk about the Audible AI and the Claude on Copilot, but let me do this one very carefully, because oh my gosh, um, it's like Voldemort, he who must not be named. So we have a very terrible political assassination that occurred last week, the week before. This is a New York Times article saying that the firing of educators over comments about that individual follows a familiar playbook. And this is from September 22nd. That's a gift link that you can go to. I will say that I have not publicly posted anything with that person's name. There have been numerous educators fired from their jobs because of things they have posted on social media about that situation. So I would encourage everyone out there to be very wary and very careful. I also think that we need to be we shouldn't be giving up our freedom of expression and our boldness and the importance of being active citizens. But at the same time, I will just say that I am feeling more inhibited and chilled in my own public speech than I ever have in 55 years of life on the planet. And if you haven't looked at that New York Times article, it's worth taking a look at, because it is a crazy time of polarization. And we will jokingly say, be careful out there, kids. But folks, seriously, we really need to be careful of the things that we say and how they might be interpreted by different audiences, and just be really, really careful. Your turn, sir.
Yeah, so this is news out of Microsoft, and I actually think that this increases their relevance in the AI race. They announced a strategic partnership with Anthropic, the maker of Claude, and so and I have not tried this in my university-based Copilot account yet, so I don't know if it's in the I'll admit I don't understand the Microsoft strategy very well here. just because I don't live in that space day to day. So I don't know if this is going to end up in the kind of sort of paid version of education, Copilot for education. I do think it's going to end up, or I do think it's in paid versions of Copilot. And so I did find, or I did get a 6-month, not trial, but relatively inexpensive version on my personal account that I've been playing with a little bit, because it does do some interesting things in the Microsoft Office apps. But I think the fact that they're getting to a point where there's multiple models is both really smart for Microsoft and also will increase the impact and effectiveness of those tools. So Claude 4, Sonnet, I'm sorry, Claude Sonnet 4 and Claude Opus 4.1 will now be available as an option in Copilot, Microsoft Copilot.
So on that note, vibe coding continues to be an extremely important dynamic that is happening in the world of AI, using basically AI platforms to have a dialogue with the LLM and be able to generate code. And so this is a Forbes article from September 23rd by Dave Goel, who is the CEO of Think AI, who may be a little biased in this conversation. But his article is just basically highlighting what is happening with prompt-based coding, defining vibe coding, but then also essentially saying that in his opinion, vibe coding is not a shortcut. It's a shift in focus. I totally agree with what he's saying, that it's, moves this to be beyond engineers. There's risks to watch, but that this is a really big deal. And again, and I don't know whether I'm going to do this or not. I've played with the idea of proposing a vibe coding class for high school. I'm really happy to be back to all middle school this year, but I won't go into it, but on my Speed of Creativity blog, I wrote it up. I coded it. I think it's pretty cool. I called it a federated reader, but it's a script. It's an AppleScript, this JavaScript, and it grabs every newsletter from my own email, and then it formats it just like I want it, and it puts it on Mastodon, and I can read it in Flipboard. It's freaking great. I love it. No way in heck that Wes Fryer is coding this without the help of AI. No way. And actually, Jason, I don't know if you've seen something like this, but my next thought is, when I'm reading or listening to podcasts, or I'm choosing podcasts, I'll just kind of scroll through what's been recent and I'll add them to my queue. But I think I want an AI that will ingest my current RSS of all my podcasts, and then, knowing me and the things that I like and I share, go ahead and surface for me, these episodes that I need to make sure I don't miss. And that would be really, really cool. So vibe coding, it's a thing. And, if we're in the world of computer science and teaching, we probably should be working with that, playing with that, and then probably teaching about it too.
Yeah. And I would also, have you played with Visual Studio Code?
Not yet.
So that's really interesting, because that's I'm sorry, Visual Studio Code, not Visual Code Studio. That is an open source product that Microsoft owns, but I'm sorry, that I think Microsoft open sourced, but it's available on all platforms. But it has a coding copilot on it, so it can actually, you can point it towards your code base in a directory. I've also played with it as as another option for playing around with my Obsidian Vault that, like I talked about earlier. But and I'll admit, like, it's an IDE, so integrated development environment, interactive development environment, whatever an IDE is, but it's a coding platform, right? But like, a couple of weeks ago, I didn't have the. I was looking for a distraction for a couple hours. I did vibe code a Chrome extension that used my OpenAI API to turn an article into a markdown file that I could import into Obsidian, right? And it worked great. It looked terrible. It wasn't very good. But like, it worked. right? And when I had to install it as a developer version, and I got all the warnings because of hack this and hack that. But yeah, I mean, I'm not a coder either, right?
I
I
mean,
wish
I've gone and said, wait a second, do I have to give this access to all my sheets to delete everything?
Yeah,
And I went back and forth with it. It says, well, you're only going to be authorizing this specific, there was like a scope or something. So you're
yeah.
fine. But yeah, you're a little bit hesitant clicking those boxes and say, sure, I'll give this vibe coded script that I don't completely understand access to delete every Google sheet I've ever made.
Yeah, and I and again, and I actually am thinking about maybe and I have probably a dozen stupid Gmail accounts that just I've collected over time, but I'm actually thinking about maybe taking one of those and turning it into my, there's no personal data anywhere in there, and it's not like I'm constantly pointing things. I certainly never pointed to anything at work, but in my personal account, especially when I'm playing around with the Google backend stuff. But yeah, yeah, and if you go online, there is a lot of controversy about vibe coding, right? And
Oh, huge.
a
Yeah.
lot of people in the profession, in part, legitimately worried about their jobs, right? I have some distaste for it, but especially for someone like you and me,
Oh
right,
my
that we have
gosh.
just enough knowledge to be
Oh.
scary, especially when you're kind of creating little personal solutions.
Someone
It's really
who
great.
yearns for the power I used to have in the early 2000s with FileMaker Pro, because
Yeah,
I created really cool solutions for our College of Education.
yeah.
But yeah, I don't know if I mentioned this, but our school is now blocking all Chrome extensions not specifically approved and even removing them from our personal accounts. So even at school, I can't use any Chrome extensions that I like that aren't approved. So the
Yeah.
power of
My
IT.
sympathies for your situation. So, hey, we got to get to our geeks of the week, but there's two quick things I want to share there. One, because it's before we get into that, because it's time sensitive. So first, you've probably seen this if you are in general tech savvy, but students can get a free year of Google Gemini Pro, and I think you just need an edu address to get it. But I would suggest, and especially since so many teachers are graduate students, right, at some way, shape, or form at a university, that it would be well worth your time to look into the offer. But it doesn't just give you access to all the pro versions of stuff, but it gives you the advanced version of Notebook LM, so 300 sources and more chats per day, and also the 2 terabytes of storage for a year that come with that as well. And so I put the link in for that. It's a really, really, really great deal. And then the other one I want to point out is that Mixtral, which is the French-based model that is necessarily going to be a little more privacy friendly because of where it's located at, now has student pricing available, and it's also available to educators. You can get a full year of Mixtral Pro available for, I think it's like $70 a year to get the pro version of it, and that it has way less limits, and their models have gone from being interesting secondary models to their most recent release, which I think is called Mixtral Medium, is competitive with the frontier models. And so if you're not paying for something right now and it's because of price, or if you don't feel like you're getting your value out of ChatGPT, Claude, or other products in that way, I think $70 a year for an educator, and it has all of the wonderful things that you will be looking for, which includes the ability to look through data, generate code, generate images, some of those in an unlimited way. I really like Mixtral, and it's something I keep an eye on. So that's something to check out as well.
Absolutely. All right. Well, Geeks of the Week, I've got two quick ones. The first one is that, as many of you may know, Lucy Gray is a phenomenal connected educator, and she is putting together, facilitating with others, a conference called Thrive 2026, Defend Democracy, Protect People. So that conference is coming up January 21st and 22nd, 2026. The calls for proposal are there. If you're interested in supporting representative democracy and civics, education, and things like that, that's a great conference to be a part of. And then, Dr. Neifer, I finally did it. you have positively changed my life with OpenMCQ. And so this last week, I went ahead and both recorded a video and wrote a podcast I called Kahoot Quiz from YouTube video via OpenMCQ. And basically, when I find a good YouTube video, or maybe it's one I already have in my curriculum, I can quickly use AI to generate a transcript. With OpenMCQ, use best practices to generate a 10 question, a 20 question, multiple choice quiz. And then with the AI features built into Kahoot, which is the only part of this that someone pays for, our school pays for teachers to have accounts with Kahoot, it will directly extract those questions, answers, and then you can put pictures on them. And sometimes I'll go in and change them, but it creates a quick draft. And that is a fantastic workflow. Again, it's like an AI-powered app smash. And if you haven't checked out OpenMCQ by the Montana Digital Academy, you need to do that, folks. How about you?
That's awesome. And, in fact, we're going to do a public re-release of OpenMCQ, Dr. Fryer, and I will include your article and YouTube video, because I think that's exactly the kind of of clever innovation that we really should encourage teachers to do when they have an app that they like Kahoot. That there's almost certainly a way that you can create better outcomes by inviting an AI model into the conversation
and dramatically speed up your workflow.
Yeah,
dramatically.
I like to share an interesting Chrome extension. Sorry, Dr. Fryer, for mentioning a Chrome extension just after your admission, but this one's really interesting, and this is really aimed at people that are running Apple Silicon Macs. You can do this on PCs and Linux boxes, but the Apple Silicon is really good with local AI. But it's called Native Mind, and basically it allows you to download models to your computer through a system called Ollama, but you don't have to have an Ollama installed to use. I think you don't have to have Ollama installed to use Native Mind, but basically it allows you to download one of the open source models to your computer, and the small ones work on even the most minimalistic M1, MacBook Air from 5 years ago, right? And what's cool about it is that you can add a bunch of AI functionality to your browser. So it attaches your tabs to it, and you could do things like summarize this article, or write 5 multiple choice questions about this article, or explain to me this concept from this article. And it is really, 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 really interesting, and it's become much more functional. And as the smaller models become very functional, which there are dozens of them now that are really excellent, you would probably be hard pressed to notice the difference between this and a paid AI product that is sitting in your browser. So it's called Native Mind. It is a Chrome extension, and it's all built to work pretty easily with relatively minimal technical knowledge. So give that a try. And Dr. Fryer's on mute.
And maybe that's good, because it's time to quit. I just say we don't need to send everything to ChatGPT 5 for the top thinking, top processing, top energy consumption, right? Nope. There's a lot of things that are just not, and I hope that we're going to see more AI tools sort of fork requests and be like, well, that's really basic. Let's just process that locally on your device, rather than, taking however much carbon to process it. So Dr. Neiffer, when you're not illuminating us with your knowledge of AI and EdTech, where can people find you online?
Well, best place to find me, I think, is LinkedIn. Just type in Neiffer, Neiffer, or in fact, if I think if you typed in Jason Neif, you probably find me. And also my website, aicentrist.com.
Awesome. And I am wesfryer.com. I'm on a bunch of platforms, and my favorites are actually, it's vacillating. It was Blue Sky for a while, and now I've joined a Mastodon instance called Triangle Toot, which is based in the Raleigh-Durham area. It's more local. I couldn't figure out exactly who owned the Mastodon.cloud. So anyway, it's either Mastodon or Blue Sky, but you can find me lots of places. And this has been the EdTech Situation Room. We are a mostly once a week podcast, and you can find all the links to the stuff we talked about a couple ways. It is here on YouTube if you're watching the video, in our chat that'll be archived, but you can also go to edtechsr.com, download small audio versions of our podcasts, and I truly am going to work on expediting this workflow. We would love to have you follow us on Facebook, because we can't stream live to Facebook until we get like 46 more subscribers. I think you got to have 100 subscribers, and so anyway, we probably need to plug that more. But we're on socials. You can find us anywhere you hopefully are finding podcasts, and we appreciate you tuning in live, as we've had a couple of people tonight, or if you're tuning in later, let us know you watch the show, send us your questions, and as always, stay savvy and be safe out there, and be careful and judicious in your use of social media in the days to come, I would say. Take care, everybody.
Night.